Well, somebody who's given a great deal of thought to whether Trump and Trump's administration is and are fascist is Simon Kuper, columnist for the Financial Times, who's written a piece in today's FT titled Defining Donald Trump. You've given a lot more thought to this than people who perhaps just bandy the word about all too readily. You conclude that he isn't, don't you?
I mean, first of all, he's a dangerous authoritarianism. So whether you say he's a fascist or not, that doesn't minimize him in any way. He's very dangerous, but we have to understand what he is. And I say, look, a lot of the things he does are kind of textbook fascist. And I used Umberto Eco's famous checklist of fascism from 30 years ago. And Eco says a fascist says there's this threat from intruders, often foreigners, and I, the dictator, represent the people, and everyone who disagrees with me is treasonous and should be punished. And there are conspiracies against us. And the leader speaks in very simple language to prevent any complex thought. So all that is very Trumpian. And in those senses, in his methods, he looks a lot like a fascist, yes. What I argue in the article, and I was kind of led by this new German collection, writings by historians comparing the 1930s to today, a very big difference, core difference between Trump and Hitler, because we are in the world where we're drawing that comparison now, understandably, based also on what you said in your intro. But a big difference between Trump and Hitler is that Hitler thought the ultimate thing that a people can do, the highest human purpose, is to unite for war and to fight a bloody war in which, the people proves itself as supreme. And to do that, you need a strong bureaucratic state. So that was Hitler. Trump thinks the highest human purpose is self-enrichment of yourself and your family. He thinks everyone wants that. It's totally natural. It's also why he doesn't hide his family's self-enrichment from his presidency, because he thinks, look, it's natural. It's what everyone would do. It's what we're all here for. And Trump thinks that war in which you could die is stupid. So fascists always have a cult of death. They, like Putin now, cults of the Russian soldiers and Russian people killed in World War II. That's classic fascism. These marches with flares. Trump doesn't do that. He thinks that people who die in war are stupid. They're suckers. They're losers, he said. He thinks you should be out there trying to make money for yourself. And the wars he's seeking are ones where there's no opposition. It's rollovers, like Venezuela. You go in, you take the president, no Americans killed. Yeah. Greenland, it would be really easy to take. That's what he wants. He doesn't want to lose any soldiers.
So let's talk for a minute as well about, for example, the Supreme Court I mentioned. There are still some important parts of the US system that can still push against him and even exert control over some of his decision-making.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard political scientists say it's remarkable how much pushback there is in the United States to this authoritarian push. So you have people voting for candidates like Mamdani. There was a Democratic sweep of smaller elections a couple of months ago. Many media are very critical. People are always knocking the media, but in fact, many US media are attacking Trump all the time. Judges push back from the Supreme Court to lower down. People in Minneapolis are protesting now over this what I would call a murder of this woman in a car by ICE agents. So it's really not that easy to impose authoritarianism in the US. I think that's what he wants, but it doesn't mean he gets it.
Well, he has tried, hasn't he, on things like academics, media, research programs, using visas against researchers who aren't citizens to just end the research that they're doing, that kind of thing. There's a kind of pettiness in there that looks all too familiar.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just petty. I think that there are a lot of people around him who've thought hard about their enemies. And so, for example, the universities are enemies and they want to eliminate them. But the US has these quite strong institutions. So Harvard, for example, they've taken the fight to Harvard, but Harvard has an endowment of about $50 billion. Harvard can afford to lose a fight with the government. It's hard to knock out Harvard. I spoke to an Indian friend who said in India, the authoritarian push by Modi is more effective because Indian institutions are younger and weaker than American ones.
If he's not a fascist, he is, as you describe, a dangerous authoritarian. Do dangerous authoritarians, particularly somebody like him who's in a second term, voted in, democratically voted in, do they inevitably change the political terrain? I mean, political terrains change all the time, but has he fundamentally changed the political terrain in America so that the old sort of patrician left and right will no longer be in the mix next time around?
I think that for a long time there's going to be an authoritarian option after he goes. And there'll be people who want to claim the mantle and who say, you know, all these liberals and Hispanics and so on, they're the enemy, they're treasonous, and we can't just kill them.
You only have to look at JD Vance's response to the Minneapolis killing to see an example of that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Vance is he's a total opportunist. And in a different political setup, if there were advantage in being a kind of constitutionalist centre-right candidate, he would happily be that candidate. Vance is about power, and power now, right now, is being in Trump's slipstream. But I think that, you know, after Trump, you might get a constitutional government of Democrats or of the centre-right. But there'll always be these people outside saying, oh, these people are traitors, they're the elite, they stole the election, and we must attack them with force. And the thing about the US is, unlike any other democracy, everyone has a gun, or at least the people who hate the government have guns.
And often when you, historically pre-Trump, when you talk to Americans about their right to bear arms, one of the reasons they often cite is that those who insist that they want to keep that right. One of the reasons they often cite is should a government of the day, the government of the day, turn on the people, we've got arms that we can use against them. Now, that isn't quite what we're seeing, is it? When the government, in part, has turned on some people in America, very much so, when you look at some of the anti-immigration activity. But people aren't using their guns on those men and women, are they?
No, I mean, Minneapolis is a kind of fairly well-off, organised sort of city that we would recognise from Europe, and people don't go around
shooting people
waving
to solve
guns there.
disputes.
What has happened in the US, and it's happened over the last 25 years, is that the arming of the military has spilled over into arming domestic forces. So the US police, when they show up often in black neighborhoods, they look like an occupying force. They look like the US Army invading Iraq. And when you saw ICE yesterday, it looks like a war zone. Yeah. It looks like soldiers in Afghanistan dealing with civilians there.
I also saw some footage from Chicago, from downtown Chicago, taken in the last week or so, I think. And it was bizarre. It was just, you know, like I don't know, think of Oxford Street, think of the main high street where you live. And it was just a very large number of Robocops, you know, in terms of the level of armament that they had, wandering around the city streets. And it was like, God, it was so uncomfortable to look at, let alone to be in.
Yeah, I mean, the population is the enemy, or a lot of the population is the enemy in the views of the Trump administration. In a sense, it's not so different to Iran, where, you know, you have the kind of militias around the mullahs who walk around with guns to intimidate people.
Well, I was thinking about that. When some of the unmarked individuals, where you've got no means of identifying them, you know, they don't have a number and they don't have an ID on them, some of them, who knows who they are? They might be with ICE, they might be operating on the part of the authorities, but they could just be a bunch of thugs who've decided to make hay. No. That is sort of tyrannical, isn't it? That's police state territory.
Well, the thing an authoritarian leader wants is to capture the army. And so in Egypt, that's what the authoritarian leaders do. In the US, it's harder. I mean, the military is genuinely neutral. They genuinely don't want to get involved in shooting their own population. So Trump has had to look beyond the military. And so you go for state national guards of Republican states where you can trust that the leaders are on your side. And you go for ICE, you build it up, you turn it into a militia. And then you have the January 6th militias, the people who helped storm the Capitol on January 6th, like the Proud Boys. So Trump has a lot of armed people who he can set on his enemies. And so if you're an opposition politician, or if you're a Republican politician he doesn't like, anyone he doesn't like,
it's real danger
Trump can
there.
say this person is a traitor, and that's a signal to militias. You can threaten that person or kill them.